everybody. Welcome to Time to Write. And as usual, we're going to get started by talking about our highs and lows for the week. So I'm going first today. So my high is that my kids are home from spring break. And my low is exactly the same.
Right?
I mean, you guys, this is my ongoing, I was talking to someone one time and I said, I really struggle to write anything when they're out over the summer. And I had a friend that was like, maybe it was you, said, I don't think it was someone else, said, okay, what if you just let go of the idea that you're going to write anything over the summer? And it's sort of maddening because for those of you who, I know not everybody's in this, there's so much time where I'm sitting and waiting. In theory, I could totally be writing while they're at the pool or writing. It's just my brain does not have any space, any open space. So
yeah, I was actually talking to someone about that this morning, where it's really not about the time. I feel like, as ironic as that is on our show, Time to Write. I think it's that brain space. Because for me, when my kids are home, especially now, because they're not home consistently, it's that half of my brain is on ready alert.
Right.
What needs
so
to
I'm trying, I will say this week, I am trying to set a little bit of time just for a little bit of writing, just to keep my toes. And as I mentioned, I'm revising something old and I'm starting something new. So just keeping a few notes about where things are. Just
right. To keep it fresh.
And what about you, Amy? What are your highs and
lows? Let's see. Okay. So I would say a couple of highs. Last week or a few days ago, I had lunch with a friend who is not a writer, but she's just super encouraging and asks great questions and just really has supported me on my writing journey. So that was a really sweet time. And then also with my accomplished authors stuff, I have started to work with some beta clients. Yay! And really where this is very one-on-one close work with people to help them figure out their branding and their content strategy and things like that, just to give me a better idea of how to hone in and be very specific and help authors on how to do those things. So I had a meeting with one of my beta clients, and that was super fun. I just love hearing what people's passions are and figuring out what represents them and all the things. So that was super fun. And then I would say my low, actually, and this has been something that comes up every once in a while for me, where I have insomnia and I sleep horribly, and it just impacts the next day and impacts my routines and things like that. So that's been kind of a low. That's not so fun. Yeah, total bummer. And then just trying to kind of, use my days as well as I can when I'm exhausted. So yeah.
It's such a thing that doesn't make any sense when you're in it, and yet
no. Yeah. And when you try all the things, I will say that one of the things that I've tried, and sometimes works well, this time it did not, is I'll listen to, I think there's an app called Headspace, and they had some great content. One of them is called Rain Day Antiques, and it's like a little story.
Yes.
At the beginning, it's like a meditation where it's breathe in and count to 10 and, breathe in, breathe out, count to 10, get comfortable. And then it's the story and there's rain in the background, and it's a British guy speaking, and it's just very soothing. So
that's pretty great.
My daughter told me about it.
Yeah.
Originally, but it's Rain Day Antiques, and it's on YouTube for free. So I'll try to put a link to that in our show notes and stuff.
I actually really love Headspace. I have the paid version. I love they have some really good meditations. I haven't really used it for sleeping. It's more for daying.
Right.
And you realize you're off the rails. They just got a pretty quick reset. So, okay, you guys, we are doing another craft episode, and this one is about cookies.
We should have some, but we don't.
Right. We should. We don't. I read about this from the author Susan, I think it's Dennard, maybe Dennard, Dennard, who's a super cool author, and she's got a newsletter, which is great. But she talks about magical cookies, and her idea is the magical cookies are the reason you want to write the story to start with. Like, what are you excited about in this project? And she has you write them all down on a piece of paper. Like, what are all the reasons? And that can be everything from like mother-daughter relationships to food description. I mean, think about like my kids used to love to we listened on audio to the Redwall books, which are
oh yeah,
all
Brian
these,
Jakes,
like
Jacks.
Yeah, these rodents in sort of some dressed up rodents, but the food descriptions in those books make it really clear that for him, vegetarian rodent feasts were clearly a major element of his magical cookies. So, and like my kids loved them. So that's part of what we're getting at here is what are the things that make you I love clothes. Like my characters, some people don't care at all what their characters are wearing. You're gonna know what my characters are wearing because I love that stuff. So, and Amy, what are some of yours?
Oh gosh, I was thinking about that. I love music, and although I have to be careful because I want to make things timeless, so I don't want to name like specific things. I love conversations, like banter. Like
banter. That's totally can be one.
Yeah.
So, and you can do it for what you love in general, but really try to get it to this specific project. Like, what are you really excited about for this specific project? And write those all down. And so then this is the big tip that Susan Dennard offers. And I found this because I am trying to figure out how to write faster because I am so slow. I'm so slow. And so she gave this suggestion, which is when you sit down to write a scene, kind of lay out like what you want to have happen in the scene, just off to the side on a little piece of paper, and then look and see what of your magical cookies is in that scene. And if you don't have any, either figure out how to get it in there or ask yourself, do I really need this scene? Because sometimes you realize you've written a scene that is someone leaving the restaurant, getting in the car, going to their house, blah, blah, blah. You don't need that scene.
Right. So what you have at the end is a whole book of magical cookies.
You have a whole book of magical cookies.
Okay.
It's just magical cookies. You don't write any scenes that don't have a magical cookie in them. Because here's why. If we hate writing it, people will hate reading it.
Reading it, yeah.
And I'm not talking about just like this is fun, because I feel like in Lifestyles of Gods and Monsters, there was a scene that was heartbreaking for me to write, right? Like it was heartbreaking. It was super hard, but it was also absolutely necessary. It has a ton of my magical cookies in it because part of the heart of that book was the real connection that can exist between members of a family.
Which
right?
I think that's a really great reminder that one of your magical cookies can be theme related, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely theme related. So it doesn't mean that it's happy or anything like that, or you feel joyous afterwards. You may feel the joy of completing it, or that you got it down on paper, and, you know, that kind of victory feeling where you want to like stand up at your desk and, you know, celebrate. But yeah, I think the thematic magical cookies, but also, you know, just action.
Right. Some people it's action. Some people it's like, if you are a person who loves like if you are a person who loves true full-on weepy beaches level experience, that's one of your magical cookies. And the great thing about your magical cookies is, okay, just think about this. There are people in the world that love oatmeal raisin cookies. It's their favorite cookie, even with raisins in it. They exist.
Are you
They're
sure?
out there.
Are you sure?
I know. They're there. They exist. And so you don't have to defend your magical cookies to anyone else. They're your magical cookies. The idea is to make sure they're in your book, because the thing that Amy and I this is the thing that is the most important for you to understand, is that your magical cookies will also be someone else's.
Right.
And so
Yes.
if you
Yes.
loved writing it, someone will love reading it. But if you hated writing it, more people will not like it, or they'll be bored, because that is also a thing. When you're sitting there, we've all done it. When you're sitting there writing a scene being like, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. I hate everything about it.
But I do think I will take a step back from that and say, sometimes you do just have to do that just to get it on paper.
Oh, right.
And then you look at it and you're like, oh, more cookies.
Right. But I think if you can but I think maybe the change that I'm trying to make is, if I'm sitting down to write a scene that is like, there are scenes I don't enjoy writing. Like, I really don't like getting people in and out of cars. I find it very challenging. But then if I can add a magical cookie, then all of a sudden I'm fine.
Right.
Take them all in and out of the car all day long. We're in and out. That's fine.
We're bantering in and out of the car.
I get banter, or
yeah,
I get,
right.
There's a whole scene in Lifestyles where they're in a car together, but siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Yay, I'm in. I'm great. I'm fine. So just sort of that framework of thinking, what are yours, and can you get them into the scene you're writing?
Right. And I think this is super helpful, because there are going to be those hard scenes, period. Like it's just a fact. It is what it is. So I think in relating this to kind of the time to write piece of things, if I know I can struggle with procrastinating, especially when I dread something. And there are scenes where like, oh, I dread writing this because, fill in the blank. I think our last episode about story circles, we talked about like really kind of cranking up the heat on your main character. And I dread that. I don't want to hurt my poor, sweet main character. Yes. And so there's a little bit of dread for that. But if you can add in the magical cookie, then it's one more tool and way that you can, like a coping mechanism to help you like sit down and get the words onto the paper.
Right. Which is the key thing. And here's another thing that I mean, Amy totally knows this. Like for me, is a lot of times I have to iterate. Like I'll write a scene where something happens, and then Amy or our other critique partner Kelly will be like, Emily, we actually need to see what happened. I'm like, oh, okay, fine.
Right.
And then I'll go back in and write it, the same scene, but where like maybe the first time my character overheard something, and then the next time they saw something, and then the third time they actually were part of the scene, because that is actually what needs to happen.
Right.
But so that too is also I'm not saying this is like going to make writing really hard scenes easy, just easier.
Right. So we're looking for anything, like any little thing that will help. Right.
Throw me a line. So Amy, if somebody wanted to try and use this magical cookies, what do we think they should?
So I would say that the best thing to do would be to just figure out where you can find that joy, like make that initial list, like maybe start with your current projects, or you could even start with stuff that you love reading. I think that would be a really great thing.
Oh, that's a fun thing to do. I actually really highly recommend that.
Yeah.
And I think also, and I was supposed to mention this, but I forgot. It's like the mindset shift that the magical cookies offered for me, which I find incredibly useful, is like, where are the places where I can put more joy into the writing?
Yes.
More excitement, more joy, more like
the parts that may not to be totally cheesy, but it just makes your soul sing. It's like the
Right.
tuning fork of your soul thing that you talked about
Yeah.
in the previous episode. Yeah. Where it just resonates and you've hit it. Like you've hit the
Right.
note. Yeah. Yeah.
And
So,
and I
and
think, oh, sorry.
I just was going to say too, going back to looking at other people's work, for me, since hearing about the magical cookies, it's been really fun as I'm reading. You can totally pick out what someone's magical cookies are. That really translates. And I think that's such a huge reinforcement and lesson about this, particular technique. So,
Right. Well, and also, and Susan Dennard talks about this, and I'm just really excited about it actually, is the idea that like, when you're sitting down to write a scene and you're like, I cannot find a magical cookie in this scene. I cannot figure out what in the world. Could it just be a sentence in another scene?
okay. So you mean take whatever scene that you're
take
struggling
whatever
with
scene you're
and just
struggling
making
with.
it a sentence in
Yeah,
a
I
different
explained
scene.
to Brandon everything that had happened.
Oh,
So think
instead
about
of
it. You're sitting there trying to write the scene with your main character and Brandon, running through everything that happened, and you're like, I don't have a cookie in this.
Gotcha.
Next scene, you could say, Brandon, in the car, Brandon and I talked about everything that had happened. And then you roll into the scene that you're super excited about.
Yeah. And you do it before you've written the Brandon scene.
You do it before you've written the Brandon scene.
And then,
because this is the problem, is that this is very specifically my problem, is that I end up with 20 pages where nobody cares because I didn't care.
Right.
And
Well, you
I'm
get
like,
in the
I
weeds.
have to put that in there because I have to actually just describe the part when they drove from Dubuque to wherever. No.
Right. Yeah, I'm processing that because I feel like that means our cookies are also really big focal points too.
Yeah.
So it really helps tighten what we're doing. Yeah, I like that.
Because I feel like I have this tendency to write as though the time spent reading does not have to equal the time that happened in the story. If your character had 2 weeks where nothing happened that's relevant to the story, we can just write the sentence. 2 weeks passed. Nothing much happened.
Well, and I'm thinking of Stephanie Meyer's New Moon, where there are just 2 pages or 3 pages maybe that are a month, like October, November, December, and then the next chapter starts.
And then the next chapter starts. It's okay. We all have those seasons, right? We all have seasons in our lives where everything's happening super fast. And then we have seasons where we're like, wow, that was interminable. So.
Right. And I think sometimes, like, I think back to the first time I read that and came across those pages and just the impact of it and how much it communicated with just 3 words on 3 pages.
Right.
So, and that's, I think, important to remember too. Sometimes less is more.
Right. When you're trying to really focus down, and I think that again with the magical cookies, if your magical cookie is like, sometimes it's just the scene that is the reason why you wrote the book. And that can also be super helpful, because here's where that's super helpful. When someone comes to you later on, you're, going to get published, whatever, and they say, I don't really understand why this scene is in there. If it's one of your magical cookies, you can be like, it's in there because it's the reason I wrote the book.
Right.
And so then whoever it is can be like, oh, that's really interesting. What about it? If they're a good editor, they'll say, what about it? And then that might also give you an example of what to turn up the volume on. Like,
oh yeah.
If like, let's say one of your themes, magical cookies, was the mother-daughter, and you're like, oh, well, this is the scene that shows how they interacted before whatever happened.
Right.
Then what does that tell you? That tells you that scene becomes a touchstone through the rest of the book. So as you're moving forward, when things change, you can have your character flash
to that moment.
quick back to that moment. Oh, that was the last day that was
right.
And we experienced it. So all of a sudden, I mean, just think about it's like a snowball, right? Like if that little bitty scene is the first thing where things were normal and then something happens, because something has to happen because we're writing fiction and things happen. And later on, if they sort of, I'm not talking about 20 pages, I'm talking about a flash, because we as readers had it. It starts to build more and more and more emotion and heart around it to where when it really blows up, like we're there with them. So that is one of the other great things about knowing what your magical cookies are, is then you can know what you don't really need to include.
Right. It helps you narrow things down.
Yeah.
Love it.
Which helps you understand, which helps your readers and yourself understand like what you're hoping to get across.
Right. Like
through your story.
What your messaging is, or what your
reason.
Your
for
reason.
telling the story.
Right.
Because the biggest thing, and this is the biggest thing to understand, is that every person, this is why your story matters, which we talk about. Every person is going to tell the same story in a different way. So if I say mothers and daughters, Amy's going to think one thing and I'm going to think something different. And if I say like, even something like, if I say, hey, let's tell the Three Little Pigs, but make it different. Amy's Three Little Pigs are going to be really different from mine. And that's partially going to be because of the magical cookies. And so you're just trying to make your best version, not the best version.
Yes.
Because there is no the best version.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's say someone is like, oh, this is really a good idea. This might be useful for me. What could they do next?
So I think, like what we talked about, look for it in other books or stories. I think even movies, TV shows or whatever, and then make their own list. Maybe look at their own work in progress and just kind of see. And if you're in between projects now, I think that many of your magical cookies are going to stay the same from book to book.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to be this is your voice. Magic cookies, I think, are really, it's your voice. Yeah. They
can also, one more thing that I want people to know. It can also be tropes. If you love enemies to lovers, like that can be one of your magical cookies. Tropes. Like I love, and I haven't done it yet, and I will. I love anytime there's like a royal or somebody's in disguise, a god's in disguise or royals in disguise. I love those. That's one I haven't put one in a book yet. So you can also make a list of what are your sort of like magical cookies you would love to use that you haven't had a chance to use yet. So that's another
super
possibility.
Fun. Love it. Yeah. Okay. Well, anything else on magical cookies? Or do we want to jump into what story is saving your life currently or has in the past, Miss M?
Okay. So we were hitting on all the greatest hits of stories from childhood. And one of mine, which I forgot to mention before, is that Ellen Montgomery also wrote a series called Emily of New Moon.
Oh, yes.
And I love that one. There were no Emilys when I was growing up. Now their Emilys are thick on the ground. But when I was a kid, I was the only Emily I had ever met. And so having a fictional character named Emily, who is also very sensitive, felt very much like I felt like I should give it to everyone who knew me.
I love it.
That is and I haven't read them in years, so I feel like I should revisit. But I just remember as a kid when I first saw it, just being like, oh,
yeah, I love that. L.M. Montgomery is just amazing. And it must have been I didn't realize that there were no M's in kind of our generation for you. Being an Amy, like I don't even look when somebody calls out Amy.
I have had the funniest experience now because there are lots of little bitty Emilys. And so I'll be like at the park with my kids and hear somebody go, Emily. And I'm like, wait, what did I do? Because all you Amy's than Jennifer because you're like really used to that. Pretty much if someone's saying Emily for most of my life, it was me.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, even in college, I went to a fairly large university. I'm pretty sure that there were at least 2 other Amy's with my same last name, my maiden name, Webb. And so even if I heard Amy Webb, I wouldn't turn around. Like it would have to be, I had a nickname. I'm not going to share, but I had a nickname. And so, yeah, I would have to do it. All right. So I guess it's my turn to talk about books that are saving my life right now or have in the past. So I would say some of the books that I really, really enjoyed that got me through middle school, I'm sure you're going to laugh, would be the whole Sweet Valley High series.
I love those girls. Those silly
because
twins.
It was like the good twin, bad twin trope and the boyfriends, and they were just so, it's interesting looking back to see like how she describes them, how they were the perfect height and they were, the perfect color eyes and, that kind of thing. But they were a good escape. I think for me, they were really good escape. And it was kind of like being part of, a family in a situation and, where there were things that I wasn't necessarily experiencing because I felt like, as one does in middle school, very awkward and,
right.
Like I didn't fit in my own skin. Which pretty much didn't. So.
Well, I also love about those stories. Like I think about this with our writing is that like sometimes what a book needs to do is shake everything up. And sometimes a book just needs to be itself. Like,
yes.
And that, like, I get so upset about the people that are like, oh, books should not all books should challenge you. No, sometimes you just need a hug.
Yes.
In the form of a book.
Yes.
Or Sweet Valley High.
Some books need to just be cookies.
Yep.
Not
interesting cookies. Just Whole House.
Just Whole House. Yeah. Just Thin Mints. Just Thin Mints. Ooh, or what is that new cookie? It's not new anymore, but Crumbled. Do you know Crumbled?
I don't know Crumbled.
Oh, my friend. Okay. So if you don't know Crumbled, take a look.
You guys, what are your favorite cookies? Magical or not? I'm very curious for the oatmeal raisin partisans among us.
Are we talking about real cookies? Or magical?
What are people's real cookie favorites?
Yeah.
And, what are people's real cookie favorites? Mine are always and forever Toll House.
I don't know if I can pick a favorite. Oh, you know what? I can. My sister took our grandmother's recipe, which was phenomenal anyway, and tweaked it. And it's so good. Like she was a caterer for a while, and that was one of her signature items. So my sister.
What's the variety?
Just chocolate chip. A simple chocolate chip.
Well,
and they were phenomenal. Yes.
It's awesome.
So Amanda, if you're listening, feel free to send some.
Right. Cookies. Anyway, thanks for coming, you guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you guys next time.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks so much for being with us today.
We love our people and we want to get to know you better.
So email us at questions@timetowritepodcast.com to have your questions considered for the show.
You can also suggest topics by emailing us there.
Also, drop us a review on Apple Podcasts. Not only will it thrill us.
Seriously, we read everyone.
It also helps others find the show.
We're driven by sharing stories, and your review helps us do that.
Just remember, your stories matter, and we're rooting for you to find time to write.
Even if it's only 5 minutes. 5 minutes. You can do it.
You can do it.